Welcome to Plodcast, episode 51. This has been a lot of fun doing these podcasts and podcasts, and thank you for joining me. What I wanted to talk about today is a particular approach to human sexuality, and lay out before you two basic approaches to human sexuality. This is something that I first learned from George Gilder in his book, Men and Marriage. He initially wrote it as sexual suicide, and in the process became a Christian, and he's issued the book in a revised version, Men and Marriage. And he goes into this argument that I'm about to set out in detail in that book. This is an argument where I have some skin in the game. A number of years ago, many years ago, I was fired from a job at our local public radio station. I had a weekly audio column where I presented on air my conservative view of the world, and I went into this point I'm about to make and got the heave ho as a result of it. There was an uprising among public radio listeners over this point. So, well, what is it? Basically, there are two related issues. One is that men are dominant. Men, as opposed to women, are dominant. And the only thing you can do if you are trying to arrange this or modify this or affect it by means of your laws, the only thing you can do with male dominance is make that dominance destructive. You can't make it go away. Men are going to be dominant, and women are going to respond to that dominance. You can't make it go away, but you can make male dominance into a very bad thing. And this is related to another point, the second point, and that is with men and women, you have two very different approaches to sex and sexuality and what would be considered, apart from any other consideration, what would be considered desirable or pleasurable by the person thinking about it. Basically, men have a more lackadaisical hit-and-run approach to sexuality, and women have more of a nesting approach to sexuality, and this makes sense because women are the ones who are left with the offspring. They're going to care about caring for the offspring. Now, what Gilder argues is that these things are related. What Gilder argues is that if you have a society in which the feminine sexuality, the female approach to sexuality submits to the male approach to sexuality, then basically what you have is the ethics of a motorcycle gang, or the sexual ethics of a boat full of Vikings. That's feminine sexuality submitted to male sexuality. If, however, as Gilder argues, if male sexuality is submitted to female sexuality, then what happens almost instantly is civilization. When men submit their sexuality to women, and particularly to one woman, what happens is that cities form. What happens is that civilizations begin to take shape. Now, and the men no longer, the men agree to quit being pirates. The men agree to quit their freebooting ways. Now, in order to get men to quit being pirates and to settle down and devote themselves to one woman and to stay faithful to her, there has to be a trade-off. And what Gilder argues is that trade-off is male dominance in that civilization that is being built. If men are given something constructive to do, if they matter, if their position is important, in this society, they will agree to settle down. But if you, in the name of equality, outlaw constructive male dominance, men taking responsibility for their offspring, men providing for their wives, men providing for their families, men protecting their families, that's their role, that's their responsibility. And in exchange, they get to call the shots. In exchange, they get to lead. The end result is civilization. But what happens when you outlaw leading? Right? The contract is broken. And what happens is we gradually, and sometimes not so gradually, begin to slide back toward the ethics of the biker gang, the ethics of the boatload of Vikings, which is precisely what we've seen in our era. So my book review here on episode 51 of our Plodcast is a book called Toxic Charity. I just recently finished this. It was quite good. It is a book that runs along the same lines as another book that I would recommend to you, When Helping Hurts. Many times people who are involved in philanthropic work are involved in that work not because they actually want to help the people who are the recipients of the offered help, but rather because they feel guilty for what they possess. They feel guilty for all the blessings that they have, and they're trying to atone for that guilt some way. I've got to give back somehow. I've got to do something for somebody else. And because the motivation for philanthropic work is oftentimes suspect, it doesn't matter if the effects of the charity or if the effects of the philanthropic work are destructive. What matters is the good intentions. So we have good intentions. How could this possibly be bad, parenthetically, for us? How could it possibly be bad for us to get a busload of kids from our youth group and have them driven down to Mexico and do a short-term mission trip, or to, and this is something that, I've forgotten the gent's name. I should have written it down. This book, Toxic Charity, it's on Amazon. I think that his name is Lupton. He shows how oftentimes the work that we do, the mercy mission that we do, the food bank that we set up, the handouts that we provide, are just bad for the people that we're giving to. It's a short-term relief, but we create a cycle of dependency. We don't know how to give to these people in a way that would genuinely be beneficial for them, and would really help in the long run. So a lot of deacon boards need to read Toxic Charity. A lot of deacon boards need to read When Helping Hurts, and sort of internalize the message. Of course, Christians should want to help those who are less fortunate, but do you want to help someone who is less fortunate and actually help them? Or, and set it up this way, suppose you could actually really tangibly, palpably help someone, but no one thought that you did. No one thought that you wanted to. Or the other way to go is everyone in the world thought you were the most generous guy in the world, but all your generosity wouldn't result in anybody actually being helped. Which way would you go? Which way would you choose? So here we are, Plodcast 51, and we come now to our Hamartiology section. This little segment is going to be a short little buddy, because I don't have a lot to say here, but I might as well say it. The two times that the word Hamartia appears in 2 Corinthians, it is in that great passage talking about the great transaction that occurred in the cross. For he hath made him to be sin for us, who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. That's 2 Corinthians 5:21. Christ knew no sin. He never sinned. He was not a sinner. But the one who was not a sinner became sinful, full of sin. The sin that he was full of was not his own, until he made it his own by taking it on himself at the cross. And he bestowed on us a righteousness that was not our own until he made it ours by means of his imputation. So Christ, when Christ was abandoned on the cross, in the great cry of dereliction, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, Christ is deserted by the Father. In that desertion by the Father, for our sin, the reason he's deserted is because of our sin. In that moment, he still doesn't sin himself. He's quoting Scripture. He quotes Psalm 22:1. He's still crying out, my God, my God. It's not a cry of blasphemy or something wicked. It's my God, why have you forsaken me? And so we can say that in that cry of dereliction, where Christ was forsaken by the Father, that cry of dereliction pleased the Father. And so it is that we were saved.
God in the time of the sickness, God in the doctor too.
You've spent a pleasant half hour with Plodcast proprietor Douglas Wilson. This podcast is produced by Canon Press. Please take a moment to subscribe to the Plodcast on your favorite listening platform. To hear more from Doug, please visit canonpress.com.